Good morning, everyone. Thank you, as always, for joining us as part of our business support programme for the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce Supply Chain Engagement team working on the Sizewell C project. My name's actually Shorey-Mills. I'm Supply Chain Engagement Director here at the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce, and it's been my pleasure now for just over 4 years to work with you for the Chamber of Commerce on the Sizewell C project. Today's webinar is maintaining a conformance and compliance supply for Sizewell C, very much looking at quality and the importance of quality on a project like Sizewell C. And this webinar, as part of that business support program series that we've been running now for the last couple of years, is always with a lot of your feedback in mind, the things that you need and the things that you're saying you want us to talk about. Firstly, just get the slides working. There we go. Just as a reminder, really, the Suffolk Chamber Supply Chain Engagement team, Suffolk Chamber of Commerce is the 8th largest chamber in the UK. And we've been working on Sizewell now for, 13 years. It's been a long journey. So when we get announcements like a few weeks ago with the 14.2 billion from the government, not many cheer much louder than us that finally this project that we've worked so hard on for so long is now happening. We run those supply chain platforms and really the engagement program for local and regional businesses on this project. And there's nearly 3,000 of you now on our platform, ready and showing interest and willing in the project, and that's growing month on month. Many of you will have seen our team. There's 6 of us dedicated to this project, and we're there to support you. Of course, fundamentally, the project Sizewell itself has made an awful lot of commitments, and those commitments are for ensuring that the project doesn't just get delivered on time and on budget, that it does it in the best way possible. And ESG sits at the heart of this. And as we always like to outline, the commitments that have been made to the local and regional supply chain sit within goal 1 of Sizewell C's ESG commitments, championing in the UK supply chain first and foremost, prioritising those local businesses, then looking into the regions where they've made commitments, and then ultimately making sure that the UK supply chain is playing as big a part on this project as it possibly can. And this is the way the commitment works. 4.4 billion committed to our part of the country is a huge opportunity. Many of you may have seen, literally half an hour ago, press release went out to do with Eastern Concrete, Suffolk-based firm that's just been awarded a massive contract. And in that press release, it talks about 77 regional suppliers already, contracts over £330 million. And this is a huge start to these commitments, and we want to continue to see this grow as this project develops. And many of you will know, although there's lots happening on site, it's still barely even scratched the surface. So there's huge opportunity, and it's all about building that supply chain for the UK as we now start to bring back a nuclear renaissance into Britain. And our key priorities remain the same. It's focusing on local first, ensuring that local businesses work on this project, that those local businesses employ local people, and actually those local businesses use other local businesses to deliver this project. And sometimes that will involve working together, working with your competition because the scale of this project is so large, but that helps us produce this legacy that we want. It's not Sizewell or bust. There are loads and loads of opportunities in this region. So it's about getting businesses, take today's subject as an example, getting businesses ready for the quality expectations of something like Sizewell will benefit you to win work on Sizewell, but it'll also benefit you to win work on other projects as well, because there are large-scale infrastructure projects all over our region. But it is about facilitating that sustainable and proportionate growth so that businesses are able to maximise the opportunities from Sizewell without it only being about Sizewell, so that post-construction we still have a thriving supply chain and business community in the East. And we support you in every way you need. There's a list of things on the screen, but at the end of the day, if you want to be able to work on projects like Sizewell and you need support and guidance and understanding and whatever it might be, that's what we're there to do. So please do, as always, just reach out to us, reach out to the team, engage with us as much as you can. And we are there to support you, as well as support the project in understanding how best we deliver on those commitments I outlined earlier. Right, so without further ado, I will hand you over to the team from Sizewell, who will cover off the bulk of today's presentation. So hand you over. Thank you, Team Sizewell.
Good morning to you. My name's Ashley Mulley. I'm the supply quality lead at Sizewell C, as it says there. I've been with the business just, coming into my 10th month now, I think, but have been in the civil nuclear industry and supply quality for the last 10, 11 years. So that's briefly me. Next slide, please. So we'll do introductions in further introductions in a moment with my colleague Eifion, and then we'll do safety share. Eifion will though go through his role as a quality management lead, giving you an outline as to what they do, how they do it, and how you interact. And I shall be doing a presentation later on CFSI, counterfeit, fraudulent, and suspect items. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, as I said, my name's Ashley Mulley. So supply quality lead, and briefly, Eifion, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, thank you. My name's Eifion Edwards. I've been a quality management lead on Sizewell C for 2 years now. Was QML on HPC as well from 2020. I started my most of my career really in the nuclear industry as an apprentice on Hinkley Point B, the operating power station, back in 2012, I think now. I'm also a local community councillor, and I can understand the importance of making sure we engage with the local community and having different supply chains on board in those areas too. So I'm fully supportive of that aspect as well.
Next slide, please.
Shall we go next slide now?
Right. So I'll just run through this safety share on neurodiversity. It's something I don't directly suffer from or really know much about it. So I thought it was a good opportunity to highlight it to this meeting. Next slide, please. So really, it's about challenging stereotypes and misconceptions and how neurodivergent individuals are perceived and supported. And there's a high proportion of the population that has a neurological difference. So no two people are the same, and we all are wired slightly differently, and we process information in different ways. And so really, it's to highlight sort of the challenges neurodivergent people have. You may be, you may suffer from yourself or a family member or a friend. So you probably have more experience than I have. So for me personally, it's to just highlight it to those who don't have that sort of experience that I don't. And it's the opportunity to recognise and really to focus on the strengths and talents of these people. We need to have different thinkers within our organisations. And below there are the 7 key neurodivergent traits that exist. So could you go on to the next slide, please, and there'll be a bit more detail. So really, ADHD, a lot of us have heard about it. There's a lot covered in the media. It's a condition that affects people's behaviours. It says that people can seem restless and trouble concentrating. You might think people are not interested in listening to you. It could be because of their ADHD. Autism, that covers a broad range of conditions, repetitive behaviours, speech and non-verbal communication, and DLD, development language disorder. Now, this is very common in school children, in preschool and school. So, as a parent, never experienced that with my children, but maybe yourselves, some of you as individuals do with your children. Dyscalculia, sorry, my mistake, is persistent difficulty in understanding numbers, which can lead to difficulties with even simple mathematics, and it's not in relation to age or education. Dyslexia, with reading issues and speech sounds. Dyspraxia, which is a condition in terms of sort of the motor connections in terms of, say, catching a ball, for example, which people may appear to be clumsy at. And Tourette's, we've heard about Tourette's, but it's not just offensive words. It's little things like blinking of eyes, shrugs of shoulders. So yeah, it's different traits within people that are affected by neurodiversity. Next slide, please. So I'd hand over to Eifion, who will be able to give you a bit more detail.
Yeah, cheers, Ashley. So I myself, relatively recently, a year and a bit ago, diagnosed ADHD. I'll be fair, suspected for a long time throughout life. But the medication it is, I can say, is honestly life-changing. So if I always like to try and give the support to people to say, if you think you may do it, it's definitely worth going to have a look at it. We've got different networks within Sizewell C, and one of those is the neurodiversity network. And there was one question in there which I thought was a very good question, because I couldn't even answer it myself, which is how are you actually meant to really spot neurodiversity in adults? There's a lot of different signs you can see. Some are physical, some are more behavioral and neurological. So you've got when somebody sat there, knee constantly going all the time, and it's not just in high pressure situations, but it's almost in most of the time. Eyes moving around, darting around, looking at different things. Oh, shiny flashing light. I'm terrible for it. So they also have desires just to be able to move and do something else, which isn't linked to what they're doing at the time. That's quite a common indicator. Difficulty with eye contact, that sometimes people aren't able to neurologically process doing that because of the pressures they put on themselves internally. And then stimming. So it's something that people do with hands or feet or little things that they do to be able to essentially try and comfort their own neurological position. You don't see it now, but I'm always playing with my the pen just to rotate back and forth. That's just something I do. There's then neurological signs as well. So you've got unique learning styles. Some people learn completely differently to others. Sometimes people have an exceptional memory, and they can analyze things in different ways that other people don't see. So sometimes somebody will say, and people go, "Oh, that's absolutely crazy. I'm not sure that's right." But then maybe they've just seen it in a completely different way, and they can recognize patterns, and they can think slightly differently to the way it happens. A key thing to mention is the fact that everybody is different, and everybody has different masking and coping mechanisms to be able to essentially hide their differences. That's what happens in a lot of the time. So they may appear sometimes with these different physical or behavioral signs, but they go through a lot of stresses to be able to fit in, and I suppose the nail that sticks out gets hammered. So there's two major types as well of sensory sensitivities. So you've got either hypersensitivity, where let's say loud noises in offices and rooms where people can't focus, people can't sit still, their brain can't just get into gear and start working while they're in those areas. For example, myself, I'm far more effective if I'm working at home without any distractions or anything else going on. In that way, I get more work done. That being said, it is also good to be in the office to be able to actually speak to people in person and actually sit down and have a cup of tea with them. And then hyposensitivity, sometimes possible where the brains decide not to register anything, whether it's noises, lights. Their brain will intentionally not be able to understand any of that information that's going into it. So if there's a couple lists of signs between neurodiversity in children and into adulthood, and you'll see that they're actually not that different. I'll go through the list of the ND in adults. It's communication difficulties. Yeah, I always talk too fast. Everybody always asks me to slow down. Sensory sensitivities, light is one of them, audio is another one, massively for me, but it can be any of them. Non-linear thinking, as I said, getting to different areas and being able to see things in different ways is quite a common indicator of that. In some situations, can be a high level of focus, which can be actually really positive and useful in these side of things. On the other end of the scale, then, is daydreaming and not being able to pay attention to things whatsoever. Can't really choose which one's which, in all fairness. Sleep problems, social challenges, stimming, as I mentioned, changes, difficulty in transitions. A funny one for myself, my mum always says this. When I was 3 or 4 years old, she used to have to wait until I was asleep to be able to change my shoes as a child, because otherwise I got very upset, which is always a good one. Then on a positive side of it is really deep and passionate interest about things, and getting absolutely stuck in and not doing things by halves when that happens. So as an overall perspective, the reason why we try to go through this is just to be able to raise the awareness for other people. And if it's yourself or others that's close to you that may show some of these, it's not always harmful to say, have you thought about going through an assessment in this particular reason? Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to go through the role of the quality management lead. Essentially, what I'm here to do for EDF and Sizewell C. I can go into some of the detail about how we do it and why do we do it as well, and some of the different tools and techniques that we have to go through these things. Next slide, please. So the first thing to go through is what is the definition of quality? And if we said Ferrari or Bentley or Rolls-Royce or anything of those types of words, everybody automatically thinks, oh, that's a quality product. It's not quite. So the quality, by the definition of it, is a degree to which a set of inherent characteristics or specific features of an object matches the specified requirement, i.e., are you achieving a specified target? So when it comes to being able to make sure that you can demonstrate that you are achieving quality, the first thing you need to do is identify exactly what the target is so that you know that you can meet it. For example, a fountain pen, absolutely fantastic, but if I went to space, it's absolutely useless. Or if I'm on the golf course, I'm not taking this on a golf course. It's not fit for purpose. In either of those situations, a pencil would be far better quality than this pen. There is always that balance between time, cost, and quality, and that is a fact of life. Making sure that the right people are in the right positions to be able to advise and guide on the situations is absolutely paramount. As we know, if it's going to be a quicker time and it's got to be the correct quality, then it's probably going to cost more. It'll pull from that top right hand side. And the same way for the others. If you want to try and save costs or you want to save on cost, but you still want to have quality, then it's going to take a long time. So essentially, successful quality does mean that you will most of the time have a lower cost and a quicker delivery. The biggest thing that ever hurts schedule and finances is doing the work twice. I always say to the project managers, if it's done 20% longer than what you intended it to do, it's still done. It doesn't take another time to go around again. And a key part of our jobs at QMLs is to identify what these specified targets are, whether it's regulatory requirements, whether it's contractual specification, engineering standards, all of the above. We need to identify what those targets are and then help deliver the contracts according to whichever procedures or standards or requirements or laws that we have to do. And then the biggest target then is to try and get it on time and to cost. We integrate with the supply chains and the different every single level of the supply chain. We can work at those levels, and we're more than happy to try and provide support as and where we need to on those. A lot of the time it is working with suppliers just to say, look, these are our specifications, these are our standards, this is how we can meet them. Can't do the job for you, but I can put comments in, and I can do workshops and time at the supplier locations just to be able to say, this is how we need to do this sort of activity. Some of our key responsibilities include looking at the RD deliverables. So the RD is the responsible designer. They have a certain strategy that they put in place to be able to make sure that the overview of the design is correct. We look at supplier documents like the contract quality assurance plans, CQAPs, inspection and test plans, which could be known as quality control plans or quality check sheets. They're the doing the job check sheet, which you write beforehand and you use as you're going through the task. And lifetime quality records, LTQRs. They're also known as ERMRs, end of manufacturing reports, or end of construction reports, or end of erection safety reports, or status reports. Sorry. All of these different documents that the suppliers put together, they will be generally developed with a strategy at the start of the contract, and then developed as time goes along during the contract. And at all times, the QMLs will be there to be able to support and guide of where these things happen. We do a large participation in the release into manufacture and the oversight of the manufacturer as things go through. And then when you get to the end of the job, you have to send it for shipment or send it somewhere. And that will go through a quality release certificate, which allows the shipment through a shipment authorization request. You'll also note that I say a lot of acronyms and a lot of buzz terms and things like that, which are specific to our industry. There will always be an acrobuster available for people to look at. So if anybody sees these terms and goes, "Oh, what does that particular one mean?" Then there's a full list of them. It's quite a long list. How do we do this from a QML perspective? Is we've got two main documents that support us in achieving our goals. Is the PQCP, the Project Quality Control Plan, and the MSP, the Manufacturing Surveillance Plan. And they are pretty much doing what they say on the tin. The Project Quality Control Plan is a document put in place by the QML and the project manager, essentially to oversee the contract from well, depending on your scope, to be honest, but from my scope, for a lot of the equipment contracts that we're manufacturing things with, it will be from pre-signature of contract all the way through to handover to site, and then closure of the contract at the end. For other on-site QMLs, it's a bit different. It can be from, again, pre-signature of contract, so assessment of suppliers, and then it's until they've built or constructed the components that they're doing on that contract, and they hand it over to somebody else to continue working with. So the manufacturing surveillance plan is then a bit of a guidance on just what levels of oversight that we have. Part of the nuclear quality world is having a graded application to the quality that you're applying. Not everything has the same amount of inspection, not everything has the same amount of oversight or surveillances. So it depends a lot of the time whether it's safety classified, and it depends on what the quality assurance grade would be, but then that will define different sets of requirements for the product to go through to be able to be manufactured or constructed. Next slide, please. So why do we need a QML? One of my favorite movies is The Emperor's New Groove, and we have Kronk as the project manager in the middle, and then we have Time trying to push them into getting things done. And the QML, I'm not going to say we all wear that sort of clothing, but we do generally try and be an input into the project management decisions to say, yes, okay, Time might be faster that way. That might be, as a term, the path of least resistance. However, that path is quite often not always the correct path. And a lot of the time, if you go through the path of least resistance without analysing all the requirements beforehand, then you end up having to go and do things again. As I mentioned earlier, that usually takes twice the amount of time. So the Sizewell C multidisciplinary delivery team, the MDT, they're made up of different experts. The QML is one of those experts. We then have responsible designer. Actually, I've got a next slide on the detail of the MDT. But essentially, it has a balance of different perspectives and inputs to be able to make sure that all of the team is all of the different requirements are put into the decision-making process, and that goes through from supply chain assessments or supplier assessments, sub-supplier assessments, sub-supplier assessments, all the way through to the final release of the product, whether you have clearance notes from the inspection, you have LTQR completions through the records leads, you have the factory acceptance testing completed, overseen by the nuclear services from EDF. The QML does have responsibility for a number of contracts, but our main responsibility is to make sure that our contracts are delivered according to the integrated management system, the IMS. That's our own work internally and the activities that we do, as well as what the supply chain is doing. A lot of the time, I understand, is, having been a tier 1 before QML on Hinkley Point C for a couple of years, you get to the position where you go, why do we have to do this now? What is the purpose of us doing this particular thing? And a lot of the time, it's because of the internal requirements and activities that the MDT has got to complete. And that, again, can be delivered through the quality plans for the contract. I don't see any reason why the quality plans aren't shown to the suppliers. I'm more than happy to go through all of my PQCPs with the suppliers, because I think full awareness and full understanding makes everybody more better able to be able to do their job. And And then it also, I suppose, removes frustrations because people understand why things are being done the way they are. Next slide, please. So this is the basic layout for the MDT, Multidisciplinary Delivery Team Organization. In the center, we have the key people, project manager, quality management lead, expediters, commercial, schedule, who are working in that particular Sizewell C employee area. On the left, we then have the HPC. So it's the sister station for what we're building on Sizewell C. And then on the right-hand side, we have EDF Nuclear Services. So these are essentially pre-operations, and they're the people who we are building the power station for. Sizewell C itself is a principal contractor, make sure it's built, but these people are the ones who say, this is how we actually need to have this plant in operation. This is what it needs to perform and do. They write the safety case for the operations of the equipment as well. Within in the bottom right then is the responsible designer. Often, so it's the Nuclear Services Agreement through Advance and EDFSA. So they're different organizations within EDF. Essentially, they are overseeing the detail completed of the design that's completed by the supply chain. So they make sure that whatever design is being produced by the suppliers is then compliant with the intention of what the design is going, or the specifics of the design. The suppliers themselves, in 99% of the time, will be completing the design themselves, and then the Sizewell C MDT specifically will support that supplier and how they need to get to where they need to be. Next slide, please, or next graphic. So that's the same as the previous slide, just a bit more detailed. Back one, please. Thank you. This is taken from a thing called the manufacturing manual. It's called the EPR manufacturing manual. It's essentially about 100 and something page document, which has a chronological process of how we deliver the contracts. It's not protectively marked, so it means that it's able to be shared. In that is a load of useful information on how to particularly achieve tasks. Earlier in the document, you've got the overall contract, which is, I think, a bit later. But this particular part is the detail of the multidisciplinary teams. So we've got project management, assistant project management, commercial manager, QML, records lead, audit team, pressure compliance lead, bottom right, expediter. So those are the people who usually sit inside the Sizewell C teams and EDF teams. On the far left, we've then got the EDF Nuclear Services technical lead, and these are the ones who talk about the intention of the plant and what output and process it has to deliver as and when it's operating. The CEL, contract engineering lead, that's the responsible designer with their technical leads. You've then got the RT, so responsible technique for the coordination of inspection, who's then got EMIB and ERA, who are different inspection bodies. And on the bottom right hand side, you've got conformity assessment body and the inspection agencies. So those are then a third party organization, which, dependent on the safety classification of the equipment, would or would not be engaged into the contract. Sometimes it's done by Sizewell C, not that often, but most of the time it's done by the suppliers. It's an extremely complex network of people for delivering the contracts, but it has to have all of those people to be able to make sure the correct perspectives are shared and inputted into the decisions. A specific example I'll go through later is the engineering readiness review, but the purpose of that meeting is to make sure that the design is sufficient and complete before you go and start making big shiny metal things. And there's a positive confirmation at the end of the meeting. So it means that everybody, well, at the end of the meeting, instead of saying, does anybody have a problem? Which would then, maybe people wouldn't have the confidence to put their hands up. Instead, each individual person is asked a question, are you happy to proceed? And you have to get a yes as a response before you can sign off and carry on. It's a technique that's used, it is a nuclear industry technique, but it can be used anywhere and everywhere. It's just a way of positively confirming that people are happy and they are satisfied and that their decision is included. Next slide, please. So I'd probably not go through every single thing in full detail on here. I guess it will be an information overload. But the QML is the single point of contact for anything related to quality assurance or quality control within our Sizewell C contracts. At all times, we have the oversight of the day-to-day quality within the contracts. We make sure we support the supply chain. We go and visit the suppliers. We go and have workshops at their premises, and we support the multidisciplinary delivery team. I can never say that, with quality subject discussions. A lot of the time, my first question will be, what procedure should we be following when we're following this process? Because the answers are already there. We don't need to make up things as we go along. It's already written in a procedure for us to use. Kind of makes my job a lot easier. We do audits and inspections, so we're all trained qualified lead auditors to go out and have a look at the different operations and business processes. We do regulatory interface for contracts. For example, in January, I was in Scotland with a supplier, and we had the Office for Nuclear Regulation was carrying out an inspection on CFSI, counterfeit, fraudulent, suspect items. Ashley will go through that in more detail later, but that's a very important subject. We make sure that we have the key performance indicators, so reporting, stakeholder management, making sure the correct people know the information that they need to. One technique that we have for doing this is we have a monthly quality meeting. Don't always have to be monthly, to be fair. Could be a bit more often, could be a bit less often. You suit it to the contract and how it needs to be. But there's a number of subjects to be able to go through in that meeting, which is chaired by the QML, and you have a set of actions sometimes that you need to complete as and when. But the principle of it is you go through the contract quality assurance plan side of it first, making sure that the first target with the suppliers is to set up the processes of how things will work, and as and where the Sizewell C requirements need to be implemented by the supplier instead of their own standard processes. A lot of the time you do just reference out to the supplier's own own procedures or processes, and they're acceptable in that format. But then there are other times where the processes need to be improved in different ways. So before the signature of contract, we've got to do supplier assessments and pre-qualification questionnaires, PQQs. These are generally the more basic sets of questions, and they go through questions like, do you have ISO 9001 certificate? Do you maybe have ISO 19443 certificate, which is the supply chain for the nuclear energy sector? It's ISO 9001 with a few extra bolt-ons, things like CFSI, nuclear safety culture. And you've got some other questions such as, do you have any other certifications? It's 45,001 for health and safety, or 14,001 for environmental. I forgot those the right way around. You can go through any inspections that you might need to do, or an audit or supplier surveillance before the signature of contract to do a bit of an assessment and see what the supplier is like. In fact, I'm off to Spain next week to go and do exactly that for a tier 2. You also look at the tender reviews, making sure that the quality aspects in there are correct. And if we do have a replication of scope, making sure that the replication is changing or not changing. If it is going to change, then how do we control those changes? A TER, tender evaluation and recommendation, the QML will assess the tender from the supplier and give their input. Again, we have a standard scoring mechanism for that. UDST is Universal Document Selection Tool. We make sure that our specifications are issued consistently across all the contracts. So it means that we are providing a consistent and compliant product. That's a large tool into how we make sure that those particular versions of the specifications are correct. You then have a document called the list of documents required from the contractor. And what they are is literally just a list of documents and the type of documents, the title of the document, as well as a description of what the document should be, and any guidance as to what the content of those documents would be. For example, welding packages. Depending on the type of welding, depends on different specifications. So those will point out to the correct specifications. Whether you have pressure equipment safety regulations and nuclear pressure equipment, we make sure that we have a lessons learned. So any contracts that are replicated from HPC, we speak to the HPC team and we say, okay, what went well, what didn't go so well. We make sure we focus on the things that did go well, because if you can do it right and you can do it right again, then you really want to enforce that you do that. We also then have gateway processes where we've got to do full reviews before we can go through different stages of the contract. Before you get to signature of contract, you need to go through probably about 200 or 300 questions internally with about 10 different people in the team to make sure that all the questions are answered and have a compliant position or don't need to be done at this time. PQCP, project quality control plan, again, that's usually developed long before the signature of the contract. Sorry, Bluetooth headphones getting kicked in there. I won't go too much into the before start manufacture, but essentially we look at the manufacturing risks and make sure that we have the specific surveillance prepared to oversee those risks. We make sure that the responsible designer is carrying out review of the design documents as their plan should be. We help the supply chain get their quality documentation into place well before the job ever starts. And then we have a thing called a pre-exit dashboard where we can have a look at everything on a page, nice colorful dots, which if they're all green, then fantastic. If there's orange or red, then you've probably got something to do before you can start manufacture. As I mentioned earlier, then the quality meetings as well. Next slide, please. For my contracts for offsite manufacturing of equipment, we've got a standard layout of a project quality control plan. What this does is it brings all of the different procedure requirements within Sizewell C into a single location, and it's a relatively chronological list of actions to go from start to end of the contract. So the first section that you get to is pre-signature of contract. There is a lot of oversight done here. Again, back to the definition of quality, it's achieving a specified target. If we don't specify the target correctly, how can we expect suppliers to achieve the target that we want? It's a pretty simple question for me. So we do a lot of efforts up front to make sure, as I said, the specifications and documents that are sent to the suppliers to be complied with or to be developed and priced against, we need to make sure those are correct. And then by doing that, it means that the responses back from there are going to be more accurate when it comes to financial bids or schedules or the actual implementation of the work when we get to it. After we go through the signature of contract and we have our contract kickoff meetings, we then go through the starting of the contract, where we'll set up different strategy documents, whether you have a project definition document, project quality plan, or quality assurance plan. In our world, called the contract quality assurance plan, CQAP. We go through the design oversight. We make sure we have all the different bodies involved, whether it's safety classified. You can then have site conformity assessment body, independent third-party inspection agencies. A lot of the time, if it's UKCA marked or CE marked, both of which are reasonable to use, for Sizewell C, then you would have your notified body or UK approved body, sorry, other way around, respectively. And those would then have to be appointed by the contractor. So you work with the suppliers to say, have we got a third party involved yet? Or which third party do you have? Are we making sure they have a correct third party to do those sign-offs? Again, that also depends on the equipment that you might make in your contract. So if it's pressure equipment safety regulations, then you have to meet your essential safety requirements. That's the UK statutory instruments which make those a legal requirement. You might be doing lifting equipment, which is then coming under the machinery directive, or you then have the electrical equipment, which will then come under the electrical equipment safety regulations. So all of these different legal requirements need to be assessed in detail before you get into the manufacturing of the equipment. If it's new equipment, then or new contracts, you'll then go through a design process, and it's just making sure that the oversight of the design there is completed correctly. You then have a preparation for manufacture and getting through that first notice to proceed. I'm going through a number of them at the moment because a lot of the contracts are just starting to want to kick off manufacturing this year. The first time going through that is always the most difficult because you have the activities needs to be done for the contract as a whole rather than just that one particular little bit of equipment. You might have 50 different types of equipment you want to manufacture on a contract, but for this particular time, you're only going to start manufacturing 2 of them. So you just want to release those 2 scopes of work. But again, you have that whole contract setup to do before you get to that. Once you're through that first release to manufacture, then life gets a lot easier and a lot quicker and a lot simpler for getting the rest of the things into the manufacture. You then go through the manufacturing oversight, making sure that you're controlling any non-conformances or changes or minor change requests. You keep a general day-to-day observation of what's going on in the contract, your inspections. I myself would then go to the supplier sometimes, but if it's during an inspection, it's called a joint surveillance. My job is to look at the inspector who's looking at the inspector. So I make sure that my inspector is doing the correct job on my perspective. Which, yes, it is quite mad sometimes. If you had the ONR there as well, or different regulators, you would have the person doing the job, the person checking the job, the person checking the person checking the job, person checking the person doing the job, and so on and so forth. It does get mad, but it doesn't really happen in reality, in all fairness. Once you go through those activities, you then get to factory acceptance testing, making sure that the product is doing what it's meant to be doing before it leaves the factory. And the quality records. This is a large part of our world is lifetime quality records. If it doesn't happen on paper, or if it's not evidenced on paper, then it doesn't really happen. We need to be able to provide evidence that certain things have been done. And it's a general error trap where people can find that they've made the product correctly, but unless it's evidenced, you can't prove that it's been made correctly. So therefore, it can't be an accepted product. The key thing is there that the lifetime quality records will be specified at the start of the contract. We do a thing called a petitioning strategy. So we break down every single record that is ever expected to be delivered on a contract. We also then break down what they need to be delivered for. So whether it's product A, B, and C needs these particular records, and product X, Y, Z needs different records. We agree that before anything starts. We also then have, along the schedule of delivery, we try to get all of these documents submitted as we go along delivering the contract. So it means that these quality record packs can be approved and accepted before we can continue going on the manufacturing process. So we don't get to the end of the job and we have 2,000 bits of paper waiting to be signed off, because that would then be quite difficult. You could then pick up some issues that are there. And that can cause untold amount of problems, and you don't want that. You want to be able to make sure that you've got the confidence as you go through the delivery of the contract that everything you're doing is happy and acceptable. Of course, we then get to the shipment side of things, whether it's being shipped to our site directly, our storage areas, or maybe sometimes supplier storage areas. That then has a lot of checks and inspections to do before we get there. At the end of that, from my contracts and my perspective, it's not always the same for all the other QMLs, obviously. Then we go through the contract closeout, and that's presuming we're working on the design, manufacture, and supervision of installation contract, or design manufacture, sometimes DM, DMS. If it's DMIX, so design manufacture installation commissioning, then the quality plan would continue probably in a different quality plan for a different QML on the site then. Next slide, please. So the key moments that we go through as QMLs, I think I've gone through these in a little bit of detail previously, is the pre-signature of contract, pre-SOC, making sure that the needs of the contract are identified, and we do input into the pre-qualification questionnaires or assessments of suppliers again, Dependent on the scope of the work, we can look at the tier one if they're doing most of the work. If they're looking at the subcontractors, if they're doing a lot of the work, we can do an assessment on those suppliers as well. Everything is done in its own context. But we can look at even tier 5, tier 6, literally whatever level of supply chain it is, we can look at those suppliers sometimes for assessments. With the replication, if there are changes to suppliers, processes or standards, then we need to see what those changes will be. Again, we need to make sure that we're trying to save money overall here. We're using designs and supply chains that have previously completed this work for HPC. So if there are changes, we'll have a look at whether or not it needs to go to no change committees. We then prepare our manufacturing surveillance mandate, or the RD prepares that. The inspector then prepares the surveillance offer, and the QML prepares the surveillance plan, which brings everything together in documentation surveillance, physical inspections, and any third-party oversights and quality records. So that then covers how all of the manufacturing of the supply chain will be surveyed. A general note I will add into that one is there's a term called commercial off the shelf. And if it's a commercial off the shelf, or if you're buying a raw product, raw material, then there's a lot less oversight on that, obviously, because it's already a standard product. If you're popping down to Tesco's and getting some components, as long as they come with a little bit of a record, and we'll agree those records up front before any purchasing is done, then you realistically usually don't have to do any inspection on those. That being said, you can't buy a reactor pressure vessel off of Amazon. I think EDF have tried and didn't go too well. Yeah, you can get most of your components a lot of the time will be commercial off the shelf or standard products or raw materials. You don't do much for surveillance, but on the ones where you have bespoke manufacturing, where activities will be controlled through an inspection and test plan or quality control plan, that's where you then go and do a lot more surveillance and inspections and looking at the contractor and suppliers while they're doing the activities. A big part of the engagement with the supply chain is the development of those inspection and test plans, making sure that they are compliant with our ITP specification, making sure that they are not going to trip up the suppliers as they're going through their manufacturing activities, and also then quite importantly is making sure they are defining the correct quality records that will then be produced by the end of the job. So it means that we can, before we start the work, we know exactly where we should end up. Again, back to the definition of quality is achieving a specified target. So we will specify that target up front, working with the suppliers to be able to make sure that by the time we get to the end of the job, it is all compliant. The engineering readiness reviews, as I mentioned earlier, they are one of the most important meetings we have there. So the nuclear services, technical engineering leads, again, they're almost our pre-operations people. They're the ones who say that this particular concrete needs to stand this particular weight or this particular impact. They make sure that the heat exchangers have a certain thermal change and certain conditions. They say that we need to be able to put this much water in and get this much water out. They're the ones who define the intent of what the process does. And they then hold the engineering readiness review, where we look at the entire design and the scope of release and make sure that it is all ready to go. Again, with a positive confirmation of those activities or the people in those engineering readiness reviews saying yes before we're allowed to proceed. Manufacturing kickoff meetings with suppliers. I said it's that first notice to proceed, and they come around the same time as the manufacturing kickoff meetings, which are again, the first one is usually quite difficult. It usually ends up with being just a list of things to still have to be done. But as and when you go through later kickoff meetings for the next release into manufacture, they get a lot easier and a lot quicker. We make sure we have the oversight during the work, and that we are looking not just at supply chain activities, but also our internal activities. We have to make sure that we are toeing the line as well. The LTQRs is massively important. So for supplier and for Sizewell C, making sure that we're producing our quality records as we should do, so that in 20 years' time, when I'm hopefully retired and sat on a beach somewhere drinking pina coladas, that when somebody asks about the quality records, they don't have to come to me and speak to me then. They can go to our document records system, and they can look at any of the quality records that are there. The final bits as we prepare for shipment, our quality release certificates, supplier written document, send it into the QML, make sure that it's set to the correct type of quality release certificate. So type A means that there's no problems, all the quality records are complete, there's no outstanding non-conformances, and all of the inspections and tests have been done. Final bit then is delivery or storage and our care and maintenance requirements. The care and maintenance for a lot of these things can be quite onerous, simply because equipment needs to be moved, needs to be cycled, needs to be used to make sure it doesn't seize or break or just not work when you actually go to install it. So we make sure that the specification or whatever the supplier recommends for ensuring that the product is not going to essentially fail during storage, which, as it does happen, can happen. We need to come along, we need to make sure we turn a valve, we need to turn the pumps on, we need to make sure motors operate, or whether it sits there with a bit of a nitrogen charge inside it, just so it will always have a protection against corrosion. All of these different things are then checked before it goes into storage. And if we need to look after it during storage, then fantastic, we will make sure we do so. And if it needs to be whichever maintenance routine it will need when it's in operation as well, we need to make sure that those are all known about as well. So we can add it into our worksheets for the operations of the plant, and it can be looked after properly. And I think that is about it for myself. Last time I did this, I think I forgot a slide or two. No, I'm good. That is my last slide. So apologies for the information overload. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, and I believe there's a recording of this. So if you want to go back and pick up any of the notes, then please feel free to do so. If not, please get in contact with any project managers or quality management leads that you might be dealing with, and they'll be happy to help support any questions. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thanks, Eifion. Right, I'll take you through CFSI, counterfeit, fraudulent, suspect items. So quickly, I shall go through an introduction, definitions, and there'll be a little video to hopefully explain better the types of CFSI and the impacts. I'll give you some details of a recent event and what risk mitigation we are doing at Sizewell C. Also the types of CFSI, their potential impacts and how to manage it, and a summary afterwards. So the point being is that what information I share with you, hopefully if you're already doing it, great. If not, then maybe there are a few pointers there you can pick up as we go along. So next slide, please. So CFSI, it is a significant and specific risk to the nuclear industry, as well as all other industries, but particularly for our new build project, Sizewell. And it's certainly recognised by the UK nuclear regulator, the Office for Nuclear Regulation, who do see it as very significant. They've seen examples elsewhere in France, for example, when building their power stations, and ours are derivatives of. So it has the potential to severely impact on successful delivery, and also poses immediate and potential threats to people, worker safety, the facility, its performance, the public, and the environment. So preventing CFSI from entering the Sizewell project is of paramount importance to us. We see that as ensuring successful delivery, and we need to implement effective measures to prevent the introduction and use of CFSI, because it's too late when it's happened. You know, we're looking at raw materials, components, as Eifion's just mentioned. Documentation is an example of the rising to a prevalence of. We're getting more examples of. So but the supply chain, you have a key role in preventing and detecting, not just to yourself. What is the impact to your business of the impact of CFSI, not just to yourself but also to your customer. And that detail at the bottom bullet is about 2 or 3 years old, and it did drop off during COVID. because CFSI originating overseas and destined for the UK, it's massive. It has a great impact. Now, this is also not just, this is commercially and industrially. So, it has a major impact on us all, virtually on an everyday occurrence. Next slide, please. So, what is counterfeit? What is fraudulent? What is a suspect item? So, there's an O&R definition of counterfeit, which are intentionally manufactured to imitate the original product. Fraudulent items are misrepresented with the intent to deceive, and suspect items are, well, they don't look right. It doesn't feel right. So there's an indication that it may not be genuine. Now, ways of capturing within your management system is through a non-conforming process. So they sit there and they can be recorded, quarantined, recorded, and investigated through your non-conforming process. But don't confuse them with genuine items that are non-conforming. They could be, a genuine mistake in manufacture or supply, rather than something that's been intentionally manufactured or misrepresented to you. Next slide, please. So there's a video here. Apologies to those of you who may have seen it, because it's a few years old, but it is pretty relevant. And if it isn't, it will be of use to you.
It's likely that we've all come across counterfeit goods, also known as fakes, copies, or just plain dodgy. On the face of it, it might seem like we're getting a real bargain, but buying counterfeit goods can come at a high price. Let's take designer sunglasses, for instance. These sunglasses are an example of counterfeit goods because the manufacturer has illegally copied and represented them as genuine with intent to deceive. Even if we know this is the case, it might still seem tempting to get a look-alike for a fraction of the price. The quality won't be as good as the real thing, but does it really matter if they look the part? I mean, what's the harm? Well, it might be worse than you think. Substandard manufacturing processes mean that the sunglasses won't meet national safety standards. Did you know that counterfeit sunglasses might not protect you from the sun's rays? Exposure to UV rays can contribute to cataracts, clouding of the lens, and macular degeneration. So all things considered, is buying counterfeit goods a risk worth taking? If you're still not convinced, how do you feel about counterfeit medicine? It may seem shocking, but medicines can be counterfeit too. Would you take a counterfeit paracetamol to help ease the pain from a headache? Companies producing counterfeit medicines don't comply with the strict regulations followed by legitimate pharmaceutical companies, meaning they can produce them however they like. These medicines might not contain the correct ingredients, making them ineffective, or worse still, dangerous. As their packaging can be almost identical to the authentic medicines, there's no way of really knowing what they contain. In some cases, when analysed, counterfeit medicines have been found to contain highly toxic substances. With these unknown factors, is taking counterfeit medicine a risk you'd be prepared to take? Aside from the risks involved in buying counterfeit goods, have you considered the ethics? How would you feel if you knew that through buying counterfeit goods, you'd be directly supporting unacceptable working practices, human trafficking, and child exploitation? Did you know that organised crime and terrorism is funded with profits from counterfeit goods? Does this awareness change your views? Risks and deception don't just end with the sale of counterfeit goods. Fraudulent activity also comes with the territory. This is when goods or services are knowingly misrepresented by the seller as meeting the customer requirements. Would you buy from someone who has acted dishonestly just to make a gain? Let's take a second-hand car, for example. Would you buy from a garage if you had a suspicion that they'd falsified the MOT certificate and the car was actually unroadworthy? Would you be willing to take such an obvious risk? So what happens when we discover these types of goods or services in our industries? Proving that something is counterfeit or fraudulent isn't always that easy. But even before these items are proved to be counterfeit or fraudulent, they are treated as suspect and managed with the same caution. Ineffective sunglasses, medicines containing toxic substances, terrible working ethics, deceptive sellers. Hopefully, this is starting to build the bigger picture of counterfeit, fraudulent or suspect items, or CFSI as they're termed in the nuclear industry. The nuclear and defense industries are working hard to manage the risks from CFSI because counterfeiting isn't just limited to designer goods and medicines. From electronic components to raw materials and machined parts, almost anything can be copied. This is a concern for these industries, and for good reason. Imagine the potential impact of a counterfeit item finding its way into a nuclear or defense product. The consequences could be devastating, and not only affecting the people working with the product, but the public and the surrounding environment too. Preventing counterfeit items entering these industries has become more challenging with the increase of online purchases and the complexity of modern supply chains. We all have a part to play in facing these increasing challenges. So what can you do as an individual? Start by recognizing the risk that CFSI poses to your business. Have the right policies, processes or plans in place to address these risks. Promote awareness of CFSI and deliver functional training within your business. In engineering or design roles, clearly define technical specifications, critical characteristics, and acceptance criteria. This is important because what you document here will be used to accept goods or services later on. Allow the supply chain or procurement teams plenty of time to develop robust sourcing strategies to reduce the risk of CFSI entering the supply chain. In procurement roles, make sure that the technical requirements and acceptance criteria are flowed down through your supply chain. Define requirements as early as possible. Ideally, trade directly with the manufacturer, or only use reputable suppliers who have been approved in advance by the manufacturer. Always carry out thorough due diligence before engaging with a new supplier. If this is not possible, find out where non-approved suppliers are sourcing from. To prove authenticity, make sure you have evidence that traces the item back to the original manufacturer. Look out for red flags that warn of the potential risk of CFSI. Shorter lead times than other suppliers, sudden availability of obsolete or hard-to-source goods, or cheaper than expected prices are all red flags and should never be ignored. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Always carry out thorough due diligence to avoid putting yourself or your business at risk. Remember, counterfeiting is a global problem, so don't make assumptions or exceptions based on your supplier's country. Raise awareness of CFSI with your suppliers so that they also play their part in managing the risk. Make sure you have the relevant oversight and assurance in place according to the goods or services provided, so potential risks can be spotted early on. Always check when receiving and accepting goods or services that they meet the requirements outlined in the technical specification. This includes the documentation too. Check for anything unusual, like slight differences in packaging or labels. Indicators of CFSI are often very subtle. Remember, counterfeit goods are substandard and have no place in the defense and nuclear industries. As well as managing non-conforming goods in line with your local processes, extra controls should be put in place to stop the goods re-entering the supply chain. If CFSI is discovered in your business, you should inform all interested parties. The risk of CFSI is a challenge we all face. CFSI compromises commitments to our customers, endangers people, impacts on profit, and inflicts reputational damage to our businesses and industries. Remember, thorough due diligence can help protect ourselves and our industries from the risks of CFSI. Together, we can make a difference in the fight against CFSI. This presentation has been brought to you by the Safety Directors Forum Supply Chain Working Group to raise awareness of the risk of CFSI.
Right. Obviously, hopefully that will be that video was a little enlightening. But also, in terms of the UK EPR project, we've had recent example and examples of, but this one in particular is during 2022, where a whistleblower in Japan made allegations against Japan Steelworks, and this is going, the allegations are going back 25 years plus, where JSW were publishing reports of irregularities, and so this is in terms of materials, chemical analysis results, stress measurements, hardness measurements, and JSW manufacture some very critical components for the nuclear industry, reactor pressure vessels, primary circuit forgings, certainly for our project and our sister project, HPC, and the other EPR2 reactors. So manufacturing was stopped, certification withdrawn, and an investigation committee was set up externally to JSW. The EDFSA in France, the French nuclear regulator, originally were reported, but didn't really feel that it directly concerned them. But to guarantee the situation, they set up a multi-company task force. And during November, the report highlighted irregularities affecting 20 components of equipment for the nuclear industry, and going back 9 years in that case, including 6 cases affected that would affect EDF orders. After 6 months of investigations and working towards it, Sizewell C gave the go-ahead, which was, in terms of recertification for the supplier, was some 18 months after the event. So it's a pretty recent history that it's concluded to. So it does happen on major components, never mind commercial items that you would expect, like sunglasses. It's across the board. Next slide, please. So what is Sizewell C doing about it? So in terms of our risk mitigation, we are intelligently replicating the Hinkley Point C, not just the design and manufacture, but key points such as CFSI in this case in terms of its risk mitigation. So we're looking at their methodologies and developing onwards and going forward to combat the presence and effects of CFSI. And we'll also collaborate with external parties, supply chains, everybody that needs to know. So Sizewell C has an anti-CFSI policy and a strategy that provides the high-level direction. And to mitigate that, there is an end-to-end process that we have. And these contain 3 fundamental activities, which are proactive prevention, implementing robust means of detection, and determining and taking the appropriate resolution, and also in a timely manner, and reporting it out to the right people at the right time. Next slide, please. So as part of prevention, detection and resolution, we have 7 levels of defence within HPC and Sizewell C. And it's been deployed in collaboration. And those are, as you see there, supplier selection, contract terms and conditions, supplier oversight, industry affiliation, training and awareness, investigation and communication. Next slide, please. So what activities do we conduct within each of the 7 levels of defence? So we're looking at not just products, we're also looking at services. painting, plating, even sort of special activities, special process activities like welding and NDT, qualifications of people, documentation that's supplied for the lifetime records and traceability and integrity. So any of these occurrences we record as events. But in terms of assuring and risk mitigation, we look at supplier selection, the onboarding process, asking the right questions early on of your supply chain, of our supply chain and of your supply chain. You can do the same thing. Supplier audits. Now, getting in and finding out the detail of how a supplier manages the potentials for combating CFSI. So we will audit our first tiers, but we expect our tiers to audit their subsequent tiers. So be, yourselves, what is the risk to your organization of CFSI impacting? And then what is the risk to your customer? Contract terms and conditions, making sure the clear expectations and requirements are made, and not just products and services. As mentioned earlier, we've got the flow down, the qualifications, the documentation, the lifetime records. We need to evidence it. If there are no lifetime records, it didn't happen. And also, what markets do you use? The white market, which is original equipment manufacturers and their authorized distribution. Grey market, which is distribution channels which are not authorized by the original equipment manufacturer. And black market, which we all know. So do you truly know your sources of traceability and integrity? And oversight. Eifion talked about a lot of oversight activities of supply chain. Can you do the same to your suppliers? Do you need to do the same? Do you need it to mitigate the risk? So flow down the applicable standards and requirements throughout the supply chain tiers. And in contract inspection by the DQI and Sizewell C that we do, mainly to our first tiers, but can go into sub tiers if there are risks there that we see to manage and mitigate. And industrial affiliation, whichever you align with in your industries, be in contact with them. Sizewell, within the nuclear industry with HPC, EDF Nuclear Operations, the Safety Directors Forum, which you saw that video from, the UK regulators, including the Environmental Authority, and other international organisations we will be in contact with. Next slide, please. So further activities we will do, training and awareness. We have mandatory CFSI training, anti-fraud and bribery training, which can form part of as well. And the awareness is to prevent and detect CFSI across employees, across the business. It's targeted at different levels, not just those in the delivery of the power plant. And we confirm and can verify that each link in the supply chain is aware, secure and observed. It is possible, I understand, to get access to some of the via a portal to some of the CFSI training that we conduct within HPC and Sizewell C, but that is yet to be confirmed. Investigation, quarantine. As soon as you suspect something, quarantine it. Don't let it go anywhere. Don't send it back. That is the last thing you need to do. It will only come back into the system. So whether it be the product, the service, or documentation, capture the event, preferably in your NCR system, and highlight it as suspect. Keep it as suspect until you can confirm whether it's counterfeit, fraudulent, or just a genuine mistake. And notify your stakeholders. It could be happening elsewhere. Investigate and determine whether it is confirmed as CFSI for further action and prevention, and then the dissemination of that information and finding out if there's any other history and any learning you can take from it, and communicating. Very important. Even if it's suspect, it may be worth informing your customer, dependent upon the risk, but use your discretion. You don't really want to do that, but it could be risky enough to do that, to inform other stakeholders. And the sense of the nature of some CFSI communications may be on a need to know basis. So be aware of that. Next slide, please. So what types of counterfeit, fraudulent, suspect items can be found at Sizewell? Now, we've seen through the video different, whether commercially or industrially, but potentially for us is false certification on pressurized plant and equipment or lifting equipment, commonly used products such as work tools. Who is the manufacturer? Who is the supplier? Are they known? Are they genuine? Electronic products and mechanical parts have been copied. There are numerous. Those of you in the aerospace industry would have known this for a long time, who've supplied in there. And we're seeing false training certificates, CVs, academic and vocational qualifications. That is the next thing to be aware of. A piece of paper is easily counterfeited. So how can counterfeit and fraudulent items affect the nuclear safety? Well, the quality of the counterfeit may not be as good as, or may not even function at all. But you do not know that until it's integrated. And the failure of suspected product could cause injury to workers, harm the public, harm the environment, as I said earlier. So delays, we don't want delays. We want to get it right first time. But imagine what will happen if something was found when integrated to be counterfeit. It has to come out. The delays, not worth thinking about at this stage. But we need to avoid them. And never mind the delays, the reputational damage to the industry, yourselves, and the public's confidence in nuclear safety. Next slide, please. So, as we saw earlier in the video, counterfeit medicines, they wouldn't comply with the strict regulations. The incorrect ingredients, dosages, could make them very ineffective or dangerous. And this little fact here, 53% of imported counterfeit and pirated goods into the UK in 2021. And this was just after COVID, so it would have been higher beforehand, were sold to consumers who knew they were buying fake products. So we know we do it, while the rest were purchased unwittingly. So what are we going to do about it? The ethics, that was talked about earlier. How would you or your family feel about counterfeit products supporting modern slavery, organized crime, or even terrorism? It does happen. And when you buy a product online, is it genuine? Through these websites, is it genuine or is it substandard? We've seen examples of things not performing. And what should you do if you find something is potentially counterfeit? As I said earlier, quarantine it. And internally, if you can set up processes for your supervision line manager to manage it, notify your stakeholders, your customers, industrial affiliates, trading standards and police also need to be informed if it's confirmed as counterfeit or fraudulent. And ensure that any learning that you gain from this is captured, reported, and shared. Is it a deliberate or a genuine error? And please don't resend it back. Don't let it go back into the supply chain. It's the last thing we want to happen. Next slide, please. So, quite simply, the supply chain, you have a key part in preventing and detecting it coming into your business, coming into your sub-suppliers' businesses, for counterfeit or fraudulent items, or indeed any non-conforming substandard item. So look at the typical behaviours that can support the 7 levels of defence. So effectively flowing down requirements and the information, not just from us to you, but from you through to your supply chain. And monitor early warnings, key performance indicators. Do train and raise awareness in-house within your businesses. And have open and honest communication. We'd rather know about a suspect item early doors than a counterfeit item hitting us. And ensure your suppliers are vigilant through their supply chain. Raise concerns immediately. Typical behaviours, implementing robust correction and corrective actions, sharing and learning operational excellence, and learning, and just build step by step, just building best practice. Next slide, please. So that's it. Thank you. I'll hand over to Ashley.
Eifion, Ash, thank you so much. Really appreciate there is so much info, and I'll kind of reiterate to everyone, you know, these subjects are so important. I think it's when you stop and think about them in real terms in day-to-day life, it's, you know, then just gets amplified on a project like this. And, you know, we're sitting here obviously listening to some of the stuff Ashley just said, and when you're talking CFSI, certainly in my head, straight away you think of nuts, bolts, equipment, etc. But as was just outlined, it's paperwork. You know, people's CVs. It's suitably qualified people doing the roles which have been put into place. This is all part of this. So it's so important. And Ash referenced it. You know, I know examples as well that I've seen of people fraudulently claiming of training and qualifications. So massively important subject. And I think before we catch on to questions, the other big thing, you know, it was talked about by Ash there about flow down of standards. We've said this a lot. You know, the project will have its essential standards. It will have what it expects of the supply chain to deliver on Sizewell C. And it's then about flowing down those standards proportionately through the supply chain. Some things it will be the same standard at the top as it will be to the bottom. Others it will be about evidencing to the right level to be suitable for the pieces of work you're doing. So it is so important that every part of the supply chain understands this subject. You know, as Ash and Eifion know, the reason we've done this webinar, as well as getting the feedback from local businesses to say we need to understand this a bit more, team, is also because actually some of the biggest areas where businesses are falling short at PQQ and ITT stage has been around quality submissions. And actually being able to evidence, they might be able to be quality like compliant, but actually being able to evidence their quality standards is very, very different. So it's so important. Right, so time-wise, we're going to go through some of the questions on the Q&A. Obviously, please, any questions you've got about what you've heard today, anything else to do with the project, please get it in the Q&A and we will answer them as we go. I'm just going to go from the top. I don't know who wants to answer this out of the chaps, because I think it's a good question from John. When does the warranty period start when equipment is placed in storage? So I don't know who of you two wants to answer that one, chaps.
I can do a little bit of a unfortunately, it's contextual. It depends on what the contract will say at the start of it, but the warranty periods, if directly with Sizewell C contracts, would be usually defined in different appendices of the contracts. So some of them may start upon completion of commissioning, and some of them, if for different types of equipment or whatever's being procured, could start upon delivery. But I believe for a lot of all of the contracts I'm on, the warranty periods actually start upon successful commissioning or something along those lines.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I appreciate it. Again, I mean, the complexity and variety of what's required on this project, obviously I can understand there is going to be the difference dependent on parts, where it's going to be based, the type of equipment. And it's so important, again, go back to some of our previous webinars for any businesses on here, that, you know, should you be successful, actually that engagement with your project manager, the delivery and commercial teams, your contracting teams, to understand the details behind this is going to be so important. We've got a question from Ben. So I think this is more generalist rather than specific to you guys. So we're the UK's largest rental supplier of powered access machines. Will there be contract opportunities via Sizewell C directly or supply chain? So as a general for this type of I'll use the word commodity. That's not obviously to underplay that type of thing. But when there is items like this that are going to be used across the site, quite vast numbers, most of this will be via the supply chain. Now, the project is currently looking at frameworks around some of its commodity supply. So it's not to say it won't be procured direct by Sizewell, but we are still waiting for clarity on that at the moment. What you will find with most of this stuff is that it will be through the supply chain. And so therefore, understanding who is winning those contracts, Certainly for a lot of the contractors, for example, that are going to do the parts of the image that you can see on the screen right now, the actual main construction area, they're replicated from Hinckley. So the tier ones will be the same. It's then the supply chain underneath that will flex and alter to provide a more localized solution. But we can help you start to understand who those contractors are that you should be engaging with as and when the time is correct. And obviously we work with all of those tier 1 and tier 2 contractors now and increasingly in the future to help them understand those local suppliers. So by being registered on the platforms, that's the key message there. And I'll talk a bit more about the websites in a second. Another question to do with standards. So is fit for nuclear a requirement within the supply chain? Now, I'll let the chaps answer this in a second, but I think first and foremost, well, actually, no, go on, I'll let you answer it first, Ash, if you want to.
Right, yeah, okay, I think it'd be a good idea. I would start and then you can continue and then support that. No, it's not compulsory, although we do recommend that you look along those lines because Sizewell C has just engaged in the last 4 to 6 weeks with NUCOL, NUCCOL, who now manage the Fit for Nuclear programme, to provide development and improvement activities with some of our intended suppliers into Sizewell C who have worked with HPC. So we've got a little bit of history. From that learning, we're engaging NUCOL to do development and improvement activities. So that's targeted for the suppliers that we're going to use, intelligently replicate and use within Sizewell C. Now, for yourselves as individuals, yes, we'd recommend it because we're all talking about along the same lines now. So it will be useful. We hope that what they offer will be able to be beneficial to you as well as to us in these activities. And we will be continuing to use them for the forthcoming future. So yes, not compulsory, but well worth looking into and going for.
Yeah, and I think go on, Eifion. Yeah, go for it.
Just to add a little bit on that is there's different types of certification you can get for your organisations. The more common one is a quality management system requirements, ISO 9001, 2015. They're some of the first steps to becoming more towards a certified of standards to be able to enter into the supply chain. You've got ISO 19443, 19443, 2018 as well, which is specifically for nuclear energy supply chains. And having those certificates would be very beneficial to things. But that being said, to look at some of the questions for the pre-qualification questionnaire or ITT stages assessments, sometimes we do have the answers from the suppliers, and I'm looking at their websites. They said, I've not worked for nuclear before, but then they haven't included some of the certification that they have when it comes to the welding standards, EN ISO 3834. But that's on their website. So we are quite diligent in looking at these things, and sometimes if the question isn't clear, then please clarify in any responses, just to say, can you have more detail about this particular subject or question, and open up the communication and open up the conversation, and we can definitely have a look more into that. It's completely fine to ask questions to us, to ask what we mean or what we're trying to find out.
Yeah, I think on that point, that's vital. So for any business that gets through that procurement process or ultimately into contract, that two-way conversation with Sizewell, with its tier 1 contractor, is so important. There is no harm in asking a question. The project, if you're successful enough to be either bidding or winning a contract, Sizewell, its tier 1 contractors want you to be successful. So actually that two-way conversation is vital to make sure, and as we say, Evian's point is important, because actually we want to know as much about you as a business, and so does the project. So if you happen to have the right welding standards but not the ISO, make sure you're letting that out. Now I think the important point to make here, if I touch on fit for nuclear first, like we've always said, it is not a necessity. Every business does not need to have it. And actually still the vast majority of those 3,000 businesses that are on our portal, the vast majority will still never need to go near Fit for Nuclear. But it is a good best practice, like anything, to actually be able to showcase the standards. Because if you are accredited to Fit for Nuclear in the same way Fit for Offshore Wind and other standards, even ISOs, what it shows to that company, that person that's looking to procure you or use you, is that you have those standards, those auditable standards, and you've taken this seriously. If you're a business that is in the nuclear sector or is looking to properly get into the nuclear sector, so not, let's say, for example, build one of the roundabouts or one of the road schemes that's happening linked to Sizewell. If you want to be, again, in that area that you can see on the image on screen, then it is worth looking at, but proportionate. Do it gradually. So start with the likes of 9001. Look at the other areas, 14,001, 45,001, those key areas. Then you start to step up into 19443, and then if necessary into the likes of Fit for Nuclear. Now, the important message, and you may have seen we've spoken about this previously, and very, very soon we will be launching some webinars on exactly these subjects. We're literally just waiting for the confirmation, probably the other side of the summer, because the work we have been doing with Sizewell on the essential standards is nearly complete at last. So our aim with that is to be able to tell you as a business, you want to work on Sizewell, this is what you must have. So as a base level, to get through that first gate, you need to tick these boxes. And that is everything from 9001 and equivalent systems all the way up to the likes of 19443 and beyond. Interestingly, you know, we have previously done one of these business support program webinars on 19443, so you can find that on our website. That was done some time ago with LRQA, and we know a number of businesses that we're engaged with have now done that accreditation. The important thing for us is to be able to tell you what you need. So like I say, if there's 9001 you need, we'll tell you. If you're a company that does welding and you need to be, I recognise the number, I've forgotten the number now that you said, Ash, but that number, if you need to be ASME or RCCM or any of these things to do with standards in certain areas, that's a big part of our work at the moment to ensure you understand what's needed. But again, if you are unsure of any of that type of thing, that's where you just reach out to the team and say, look, Ash, do we need this? And we will help you. John followed it up with, can you provide details for Nucol? What we will do, John, is on the email that we will send out, which will be in theory by the end of this week, that will include all of the slides that will be shared, that will include the links to the video and any other links. We will also include links to Nucol. And there are, you know, if you go onto our website, I believe there are links to Nuclear College on there. There's also links to other organisations that do nuclear training, such as the National Skills Academy for Nuclear, so NSAN. We did a webinar with them recently, and we know, actually, I think we did a post for them last week to do with their entry into nuclear skills. So there is lots and lots of information on our website. So we'd always encourage go onto the website, but we will also share the links to Nuclear College as part of the follow-up from this. Is there any other questions? Let's just have a little look. There's no other questions yet. So what I will do, oh, no, sorry. Yes, there is. There we go. I wasn't looking. Recruitment. Right. So recruitment as a general, the project is currently using an established framework of recruitment and labour agency companies. The aim at some point later this year is to go out to the market to create a formal framework, which will potentially include some new companies to be able to handle for this project. They are learning the lessons from Hinckley around standards, around consistency of those standards of onboarding and of training and all that stuff. So at the moment, there are no opportunities directly on the project for recruitment-based companies. What we say to all businesses in that sector is sign up to our platform. If you're local or regional, if you're national, I'll explain the platforms in a moment where you go to. And as soon as we know the information from the Employment Affairs Unit, we will be sharing this information. Again, if you want to, go onto our website, look under support for the business support program. We did 2 webinars with the Employment Affairs Unit, I think autumn last year, looking all around onboarding and people management and this sort of area. So all of the content is on there, but it will be something that's soon available. We've also got, so is Fit for Nuclear purely a UK standard? How well does this work for products being imported into the UK or multinational businesses? Ash, you switched on, fantastic.
Right, it's not a product standard per se. It is a business management improvement system activity for yourselves. So it's nothing to do with products and process. It's about, well, products. It's about your processes, how you run your business, how can you be developed and improved to supply whatever you supply. So it's not a product standard at all.
We can jump on about importing of products from international locations. So that's where the difference between UK CA marking and CE marking maybe applies a little bit. As and when a regulated product comes into the UK, the key requirement being wherever it's sold to, it has to comply with those particular laws. We, as the UK, accept CE marking and UK CA marking equivalently. So they essentially, there's a little either stamps or nameplates or things put onto the products, demonstrating that it is conforming with the legal requirements of the country it's being sold into. A key part to be aware of is the CE mark and the Chinese export mark are exactly the same, except Chinese export CE and E is a lot closer, and the C for actual CE marking is meeting on a surplus. So just be aware of that. That's another potential risk of a CFSI things when it comes to representation of conformity.
Brilliant, thank you for that. And obviously, as part of this whole project, I mean, look, fully appreciating some stuff is going to have to come from abroad. You know, stuff is being manufactured as we speak in France and in Germany and all over the world for Sizewell. But actually, that UK supply is so critical to this project in as many ways as possible. Quick one from Ben, which I can answer. Do you have a list of latest published packages, awarded contracts on site? So the quarterly update is going through its final assurance with the project, with the commercial team. So I'll show Compete For on one of my final couple of slides in a moment. But on Compete For, that is where the forward look for the next 3 months, very, very soon to be extended beyond 3 months through the work we're doing with Sizewell, with the delivery and the commercial teams, but also then the contract award data. So where you want to see where the opportunities are coming and where the opportunities have been awarded. So therefore, who do you need to be reaching out to? What type of businesses do you want to be talking to? That's all on Compete For, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Recently, a replacement to Compete For was highlighted. Has this progressed, please? Currently, Compete For is the platform. There are no plans, nothing for, you know, we did a webinar recently on iValuer. So I don't know, Steve, if maybe that's what you're referencing. And again, to be fair, I'll answer that with one of my slides in a moment, if I may, because that might make that clearer, just to be safe, just in case I confuse anything. So if you bear with Steve, when you see a slide in a moment, you'll see what I'm talking about with the webinar we recently did for iValuer. Okay, so if any other questions come through, we'll answer them as we go, but I'll show the last couple of slides. Firstly, just as a reminder to everyone, our platform. Any local or regional business, so that's any business locally, Suffolk, regionally, that's Norfolk, Essex, Cambridgeshire, Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, register on our platform. It is so important that you get registered. It is the single place to be if you want to have support in winning work on Sizewell. It's what we run. As you will see from some of the arrows on there, we have links to lots of the support and the events that we have and the news, and everything possible is in one place. So it is important. Get yourself registered on there. If you have registered previously, thank you. Please make sure you keep revisiting to update your details. Accuracy of data really, really supports us in supporting you. And you'll see there where the arrow is pointing towards support. You will see that there is the link there, the second option down, for the supply chain business engagement support program. That's a link to all of our previous webinars and then lots of other support and guidance. And I have just checked, there is information there about Fit for Nuclear. However, actually, little note for us, we're going to get this updated pretty quickly because it still references the Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, which is the old people that used to run it. So we'll be changing that soon as well. But like I said, we will send out the correct links on the email. Then you've also got Compete For. So Compete For those not aware, is the national platform where all competitive opportunities will be listed. These will be both from the client, from the alliances, and some of the tier 1 contractors as well. So it's also there for all businesses that are not in that regional area. This is where you have to register. And as we encourage every business across the region that we represent through our platform should also register on here as well. If you want to respond to an opportunity and put in a submission, an expression of interest, you have to be logged in, you have to be registered for Compete For. So you'll see, for example, on the infographic on the screen, on the right-hand side is a screenshot from a few weeks ago of various opportunities that were available and on the project. And actually, if you scan down the homepage, just a small amount, you see, therefore, the thing that I just referenced for Ben a moment ago, the forward look and contract awards. That's updated on a quarterly basis. We are imminently about to update in the next couple of weeks, hopefully as soon as possible. Trust me, we chase Sizewell for this all of the time on your behalf so that you can see the forward look across soon, the entirety of the project, and also see the entirety of the awarded contracts as well. Now, just because it has reference to what was said a second ago, the procurement process, just as a reminder for how this works to you all. So it starts at the expression of interest, that market engagement piece, and that is done via Compete For. This will go out. Normally you have 5 to 10 working days to respond to this. It's a basic, simple, you're putting your hand in the air. I'm interested in this package of work. I think I'm relevant to it. What the project, the procurement teams, the commercial teams, the tier 1 contractor will then do is look at those responses and work out who needs to be taken to that next stage, that PQQ. What will then happen should you be selected for the PQQ, or obviously not selected, you will be notified via email. And if selected, will be sent links to register on iValuer. That's the other platform that this is the Sizewell C procurement platform that they use for everything for PQQ onwards. And that was a webinar that we did April, I think it was. So again, you can look back over that if you happen to miss it. Doing the PQQ will then normally be a 2, 3, 4 week process, really looking at your business, understanding about your business. So still not looking so much about the technical needs of the package of work that's being investigated. This PQQ stage is about you and your business and your suitability to work on Sizewell C. Should you then be selected, a shorter list will be took forward to ITT, again done via iValuer, and that is then where you'll start to look at the technical and price aspects of this project. And there, through the entirety of the PQQ and ITT process, there will be lots of two-way conversations, or at least there certainly should be. We would encourage that, because at that point you are engaged with the right people on the project for your package of works. And then, of course, the final stage, should you be successful, we hope many of you obviously will be, is that actually that's when you're going to contract award stage and you'll start getting signed up onto the various platforms for contract management and project management. Okay. And just as a reminder, you know, obviously I've highlighted a moment ago on our website the business support program. Here's a smattering of some of the webinars we have done recently. And like I say, everything from iValuer to cybersecurity to local community engagement skills, even NEC contracts some time ago, which we're about to revisit in the very near future as well. And as we say, if there are additional subjects that you would like us to cover, like today, then all you need today do is reach out. We have done one previously to do with carbon monitoring, and the company that did that for us, Auditel, have actually got, over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're about to promote it, some PAS 2080 webinars. And it's been outlined through the various events that PAS 2080 as monitoring for carbon is the way the project would like all businesses to go. So can't stress enough, we will host these, but we will also showcase other people's webinars and support workshops and events that align to the needs of the project. So please let us know if there are things that you need. We will support you in opening up those doors. Just a couple of questions did come through. So with regards to using local businesses, what happens with businesses out of area then open a site in the area to be part of the Sizewell opportunity? Craig, it will not surprise you. This happens quite a bit. fundamentally, let's be honest, it's up to the project what they end up doing. It will happen. Now, for some of those businesses that are coming to the region, they're moving here because they are the experts. And so our engagement with them very early on is to embrace them, because if they are the experts, they're going to be replicated from Hinckley, then we need to work with them. Obviously, there are a number of businesses that are coming in where we already have businesses in Suffolk, in Norfolk, and so on, that can do this already. Our role is to represent everyone that's local and regional. We let the project know who is making the impact, and who is, shall we say, local and who is true local. And I mean that in the most respectful way. But as we say to every business that's planning or expecting to move to this part of the world, it's not about a postcode. Anyone can get an office in, Ipswich town centre, where I am today, and technically have a postcode. It's about where you deliver that economic benefit and where you deliver that ESG. So a virtual tenancy office where a couple of people in, somewhere in the middle of Ipswich, you're not going to deliver ESG like that. And so whilst you might have a postcode to be able to say you're local, going through the bidding process, you're not going to be able to win work because you're not going to be delivering any social value. So I say this a lot, and I say this throughout the entirety of the project. True local businesses are the key to delivering ESG on this project, because those tier one contractors, by using a local business, are naturally employing local people. They're putting money back into the economy. Local businesses are already involved in their local communities, already doing good, probably already engaged with the local education institutions, the local prisons, the local forces, recruitment, this type of thing. So it's like we always say, and a bit like what's been mentioned today, the tier one contractors have a huge responsibility around quality, but the supply chain has to adhere to those standards. It's exactly the same on ESG and supply chain. So as local businesses, that's why we've held some of the webinars that are on screen there, because we want you delivering that good in your community, supporting workforce pathways and things like that. Because then when these big companies come into the region, they want to use local firms. It'll be far easier for them to do it. That said, will businesses that were in London 6 months ago, probably still are in London, obviously, were in Birmingham 6 months ago, that have now opened an office somewhere in Suffolk, in Norfolk, will they win work on this project? If they're the right people for the project, they will win work. This project fundamentally has to be delivered safely, on time, on budget, but doing as much good as possible. And so for everyone, Craig and everyone else in here, trust me when I say the chamber is there to ensure that it is as represented as possible. And it's the reasons why we celebrate, like the news today, with Eastern Concrete winning their contract, because it's a true Suffolk firm winning a fantastic contract through our support, a little bit of our support helping them in doing that as well. So, another question just there. On HPC, the fit for nuclear did not apply to the rental companies. Is this still the case for Sizewell C? Ash? Oh, brilliant.
Well, fit for nuclear is more specific for manufacturers of nuclear equipment. So in terms of rental companies, I doubt it. It certainly wasn't for HPC. I doubt that it would be for Sizewell C. But please go and have a look out of interest, see what they do. But I doubt very much that they will be the required for Sizewell C. Yeah. They may be able to, I was going to say, they may be able to provide you a business improvement within your own business, but not necessarily for, well, it would apply for whether it's to Sizewell C or any of your customers and whatever industries they're in. So if it's going to provide you with business improvement in terms of whatever you supply, then it's always worth looking at.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to the point I made earlier, that for the vast majority of those businesses, possibly on the webinar today or on our platform, very high-end specific nuclear sector standards may well not be required. Best practice and improving the standards of what you deliver around some ISOs and some policies and things like that, yes, and that's part of the work that we will be doing as we move forward, getting businesses more suitable proportionately to what they're going to deliver on Sizewell, that will then hopefully come in time able to help them on other large-scale projects as well. So yes, I think look at the types of standards the likes of Fit for Nuclear maybe would want, but for a lot of businesses, take then a step back and actually look at what's needed. Until recently, and again, we did a webinar on this, and there's links on our website, we helped set up something called the Energy Readiness Programme with West Suffolk College and the other FE colleges. We are currently working with the County Council on funding that further. And actually, as a great example, Alan, that would be something worth you and any business looking into. So please do look on our website for that, or like I say, if not, just search Energy Readiness Programme Suffolk, and you'll find some links, I think, to some various bits on the website for West Suffolk College as well, because that's about kind of getting businesses to the right standard for these projects without them being specific, like fit for nuclear, fit for offshore, and so on and so forth. So lots of things in this area are now about to start kicking off. So again, stay engaged with us. I think that is it. So as always, if you have any questions, you've got our email address there. The whole team, you can email us direct, you can message us direct, catch us on social media, see us at events. I know over the next couple of weeks, I think next week we've got the All Supplier webinar. On the same day, we're also presenting at an event in South Norfolk. We're also presenting at an event in Lowestoft. We will get as many different places as we can. So please do just reach out. Anyway, we are there to support Sizewell, but we're also there to work the opposite way as well and support local businesses to be ready for it. So thank you for your time today. Like I say, we will get these emailed out by the end of this week, all the slides, all the links, and look forward to catching up with you all again very soon. Take care.